Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sheldon Bent, and today I will be presenting on question 4. Question 4 is a statement that reads, conduct an evaluation research on Jamaica's Disaster Risk Management Act. Now, this question is very vague and requires some breaking down to come to a conclusion. First, we must figure out what is evaluation research. Evaluation research refers to a structured assessment of the value of resources committed to a project or specific goal. It also refers to the systematic assessment of the worth or merit of time, money, effort, and resources spent in order to achieve a goal. It zeroes in on the research purpose as opposed to a specific research method. The goal of evaluation research is to determine where a process has yielded the desired results. The Disaster Risk Management Act. Now, this Act of 2015 repeals the previous Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management Act and makes new provisions for the management and mitigation of disaster, the reduction of risks associated with disasters, and other connected matters. The Act gives the government extraordinary powers in the application of disaster risk reduction policies and strategies to prevent new disaster risk, reduce existing disaster risk, and manage residual risk, contribute to the strengthening of resilience and reduction of disaster losses. We will not be able to cover the entire Act, and so we'll be focusing on the proclamations, rules, and regulations passed Tuesday, April 21st, 2020. The full title of that amendment is the Disaster Risk Management Act, Enforcement Measures No. 4, Order 2020. Measures set out in this order are directed to be enforced for removing or otherwise guarding against or mitigating the threat or effects of coronavirus COVID-19 and the possible consequences thereof. This statement gives us the purpose of this specific amendment. This purpose is what will allow us to evaluate the worth of the Disaster Risk Management Act. We'll be assessing whether or not it has met this criteria. The orders that we will be using to evaluate this act are the border closure from April 22nd to May 31st, the mandatory coronavirus testing and quarantine upon entry to Jamaica for 14 days, the mandatory quarantine for individuals who test positive, the island-wide curfew from April 22nd to May 6th, commencing at 6 p.m. on April 22nd and ending at 6 a.m. on May 6th. The public gathering limit, social distancing, and mask wearing. During the period of April 22nd, 2020 to May 6, 2020, no more than 10 persons are allowed to gather at a time. Each person shall maintain a distance of 6 feet and, when in public, wear a mask fitted to that person's face so that it covers their nose and mouth. The abstract of this study. This study evaluates the implementation, efficiency, and impact of the Disaster Risk Management 4th Amendment. It assesses the government's execution of the provisions of the amendment whose goals and objectives are directed to be enforced for removing or otherwise guarding against or mitigating the threat or effects of coronavirus COVID-19 and the possible consequences thereof. Purpose and problem. The area of inquiry and purpose of this study is to evaluate the impact, efficiency, and satisfaction of the Disaster Risk Management Act Enforcement Measures No. 4, Order 2020. The study conducted involved 20 respondents, 3 focus groups of 5, and 5 one-on-one interviews with individuals aged 18 to 50 with a 50-50 gender split. The questions posed in the focus groups and interviews. Question 1 will assess the satisfaction of the respondents and asks, how satisfied are you with the enforcement measures? Question 2 will assess the efficiency and asks, what were some of the barriers to success for the enforcement measures? Question 3 will also assess the efficiency of the specific orders of that amendment and asks, what can be done to improve the enforcement measures of the Act? Question 4 will look at the impact and asks, what was the value added by the enforcement measures? Question 5 will also assess the impact and asks, did the enforcement measures accomplish their job, which is the slowing down of the spread of COVID-19? To the findings. Question 1. The responses given were reduced to 3 codes: satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and not satisfied. 50% of the respondents were satisfied with the enforcement measures, 20% were somewhat satisfied, and 30% were not satisfied. Those who were satisfied noted that the government has put their best foot forward and are satisfied with the job being done by the enforcement measures. Those who noted that they were somewhat satisfied noted that there was room for improvement and that they think the government could do a better job. Those who were not satisfied noted that they did not see where the measures were enough and felt like the measures were just for show. Question 2. What are some of the barriers to success for the enforcement measures? The responses were coded in 2: personal and procedural. 50% of the responses were coded as personal and the other 50 coded as procedural. Those whose responses were coded as personal noted that individuals just wanted to flat out disobey the law. Some persons didn't care about the measures or other people's health and just wanted to carry on. Those who noted that the barriers to success were procedural noted that the government did not have the wherewithal to tackle and fully enforce these measures, and also noted that the government were woefully unprepared and that its institutions could not police everyone into 100% adherence of the law. Question 3. What can be done to improve the enforcement measures of the Act? The responses were coded in 2: education and capacity building. 60% of the responses were coded in capacity building and 40% were coded in education. Those who noted capacity building noted that the government needed to strengthen its enforcement mechanism, that is to improve the JCF and JCF so that they can do a better job of enforcing the measures. Those whose responses were coded as education noted that they did not believe that individuals were adequately educated about all of the measures, did not understand the measures, and so they ignored them, and also noted that the government did not spend enough time educating the public and increasing awareness of the measures. Question 4. What was the value added by the enforcement measures? The responses to question 4 were coded in 2: guidelines and confidence in the government. The responses were split 50-50. Those whose responses were coded as guidelines noted that the enforcement measures added tangible, punitive, and punishable offenses that served as public guidelines to maintain public order. Those whose responses were coded as confidence in the government noted that the enforcement measures demonstrated the government's willingness to slow down the spread of COVID-19, added a visible layer of work being done by the government, showed a visible layer of work being done by the government, and helped to build mutual trust and confidence between the public and the government. Question 5. Did the enforcement measures accomplish their job, that is, slowing down the spread of COVID-19? The responses were coded in 3: yes, no, and to an extent. The responses coded as yes noted that curfewing, quarantining, the closing of the borders all really helped to slow down the spread of COVID-19. They also noted that the case count would have been worse had it not been for these enforcement measures. Those whose responses were coded as to an extent noted that the government needs to put in place more enforcement measures as the ones present were not fully effective but managed to accomplish the job nonetheless. Those whose responses were coded as no noted that the measures were ineffective and were just for show. The type of inquiry for this study was a qualitative approach. Data collection was done through one-on-one interviews and focus groups. The analysis includes the identification of themes, coding, clustering of similar data, and reducing data to meaningful and important points. Limitations of the study. The study relies solely on public perception, which may be affected by biases, as well as the respondents' level of education and awareness of the measures. To conclude, based on the findings of the study, it can be concluded that the public is satisfied and believes that the resources, effort, and money put into the proclamations, rules, and regulations of the Disaster Risk Management Act and its implementation were efficient and worth it. This is the end of my presentation. I thank you.